Tallahassee, the capital city of Florida, while one of the northernmost cities in the state, it's still known for its warm and humid weather in the winter months, like on December 10th in 2019, when the highs of the day were well above 70 degrees Fahrenheit. On that typical Florida day, two small children, aged 1 and 3, were exposed to inhumanely high temperatures inside the filthy, cramped room of a mobile home where their biological mother was living with an illegal immigrant, who was not their biological father, but took on responsibility of a parent. The so-called father went to check on the kids and found them unresponsive and overheated in the trailer. Here at Deep Dive True Crime, we have trials that you will not find anywhere else. This one in particular is going to be quite intense. It involves Brittany and Pedro, and the death of one of Brittany's two children, 1-year-old Alex. This is the trial in the case of State of Florida versus Pedro Agustin Ramirez Alvarado. If you are a regular to our channel, then it is likely that you already know about this case. Perhaps you watched The Brittany Show, the full interrogation of Brittany Delgado. If you did, then you saw photos of the filthy conditions of the mobile home where Brittany and Pedro lived together as a couple, raising Brittany's children, 2 boys, aged 1 and 3. And if you watched her interrogation, you likely recall that Brittany Delgado, who is in her mid-20s when the events that led to Pedro's trial happened, had 3 additional children, who she had to give up to the state of Virginia, for a total of 5 children. You may also recall that Florida child protection investigators were already looking into how Brittany was raising her 2 subsequent children after she moved to Florida to live with Pedro, and were ready to offer help. But if you watched Brittany's show, her interrogation, you are more likely to remember the horrific fate of Brittany's 2 little boys. The smaller one, Alex, died at the age of just 1 year old. The oldest one, Julio, also referred to as Casper, survived. Both of them had been left alone in a hot room of the mobile home, with the heater on, while Brittany was busy on the phone with an insurance company, and Pedro was doing something else. You may also remember all of Brittany's excuses, and all the blame she tried to put on Julio, the 3-year-old, and on Pedro. Watching this trial will give us a greater insight, hopefully, about what happened that fateful day, and why a precious 1-year-old child died in such a horrific way. And watching this trial, you will also get to see Brittany's latest show, her performance on the witness stand, since she was called as a witness by the prosecution. Finally, you will get to see Pedro testify in his own defense. So, here we go. Let's get started on the trial. Justice for baby Alex. Here we go. This video will cover the testimony of the following witnesses called by the state. Dr. Emmanuel Pena, victims, Marsha Dollard, Dr. Lee Bashong, Deputy Dustin Brock, Leon County Sheriff's Office.
Okay.
We're going to have not Zoom and stuff.
Just a minute.
We're going to have a remote witness appear.
Que veamos si
And we just
por la calle.
have to run through this computer. We should be in order to get for the sound of the microphone and all that stuff so people can pick in the microphones and be sure. But I turned this on so we wouldn't get anything we can do. But the same picture that they're going to plug in will be on that computer.
Oh, okay.
They're doing that and doing all the other ones. So.
They're going to do all of this.
Yes, so just making it take the eye out of it.
Good.
So you should be doing that.
So I'm getting them for the rains for the last time.
No, no. Okay.
Okay.
Who's starting the phone?
I don't know, because he didn't respond to my email yet, so about, originally I told him 2:30. So,
How far along does the state plan to get today?
my next couple witnesses are a little more in depth than the witnesses I've had so far, so I'm not quite sure how long they're going to take. I think it's possible that I could finish today. It kind of depends.
I'm not asking you to, I'm just
Right.
trying to get some idea.
I think it's possible.
Because we're not going to go late.
No, sir. I think, regardless, I think I can get through, if not all of them, I think I can get through most of my witnesses, so I don't think we're going to have a problem finishing. If anything, I would do maybe one witness in the morning, and then Mr. Iturralde can put on his case in chief. So
Okay.
I'm definitely fine stopping at 5, regardless of where I am in my case. So.
Well, we may stop earlier than that.
Or earlier, especially if I finish early. I mean, obviously I'm fine, but either way, I would like to obviously get through Dr. Pena and Dr. Bashong at a minimum.
Okay. And y'all are going to be prepared to go over the jury instructions tomorrow?
Yes, Your Honor.
Because there's a number of changes, especially in the defendant's name. He is only one Alvarado. He's not Pedro Alvarado Ramirez Alvarado.
Oh, okay.
That's why I brought it up earlier. He was charged as Pedro A. Ramirez Alvarado, and that's where we're going to leave it.
Yes, sir. That's fine. Like I said, I think that's because of his middle name, his middle initial is an A. So.
Yeah. Okay. Are we ready for the jury then?
One matter first, Judge.
Sure.
I did not invoke the rule previously, but everybody was going by the rule. One of the witnesses is sitting in court. I'd invoke the rule at this time.
All right. Rule of procedure has been invoked. It requires all those present who've been called as witnesses in this case to remain outside the courtroom until such time as you're called to testify. While you're waiting to testify, and after you've done so, you are not to discuss the case with any other witnesses. However, you are at liberty to speak with counsel for either side. I will look to counsel to make sure this rule is followed to any of their prospective witnesses not present at this time. And I ask that all those present at this time who have been called as witnesses now retire from the courtroom until you're called to testify.
Yes, Your Honor. The only witness that I have present is Dr. Bashong. I don't need him to be present during this portion. I do anticipate, and because I do anticipate tendering him as an expert witness, I would be asking him to remain in the courtroom tomorrow morning during Mr. Iturralde's expert witness's testimony. I believe that is permissible under the rules that experts are allowed to listen to the testimony of other experts. So that would be the only time I'd be asking him to be sitting in the courtroom.
Well,
That's fine.
That's fair. Okay. Now are we ready for the jury?
Yes, sir.
All right, let's bring them on.
Yeah. May I proceed, Judge?
Absolutely.
Dr. Pena, can you hear me all right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Can you also see me? I know I'm a little bit farther away, but can you see me all right?
I can see you as well, yes.
Okay. Can you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Yes, my name is Emmanuel Pena, and I'm a child abuse pediatrician.
And Dr. Pena, what is your educational background?
I completed my bachelor's in cell molecular biology and biotechnology at the State University of New York at New Paltz. Then I completed my graduate education at New Paltz as well, at the same university, with additional courses at Columbia University. Then I completed my medical school training at New York Institute of Technology in Long Island, New York. Then I completed a pediatric residency at the University of Florida at Jacksonville campus. And I stayed at the same institution to complete a 3-year fellowship in child abuse pediatrics, for which I'm now certified in both general pediatrics and in child abuse pediatrics.
Do you have any additional specialized training besides your formal education?
Specialized training in what specifically?
Your current practice area.
Yes, as I stated, I'm a pediatric specialist and I am a child abuse pediatric subspecialist. So each one of those is a 3-year training, and then you sit for the respective boards for each one.
And what is a pediatric child abuse specialist, if I said that correctly?
A child abuse pediatrician is a subspecialist who assesses cases for which there is concern for different forms of child maltreatment. So in the 3-year training time, we are exposed and trained in how to assess trauma for the purpose of discerning whether it's inflicted trauma or trauma that's accidental. Also, we train about the different forms of neglect, the different types, medical child abuse, sexual abuse, and different forms of psychological maltreatment, as well as child torture.
Have you ever been published in your subject area?
Yes, I have.
And have you testified in court before?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that just here in Florida or all over the country?
I have testified in Florida, Wyoming, Georgia, and I believe I'm missing one state, but it was a very unusual testimony or need for testimony.
And when you've testified previously, have you been allowed to give your opinion?
Yes, I have been admitted as a specialist in general pediatrics, neonatal hospitalist, and also child abuse pediatrics.
And where do you currently work?
I work for Children's Healthcare Provider.
And what is your position there?
I fulfill the roles of child abuse pediatrician, and also I'm the fellowship director for the Child Abuse Pediatrics Fellowship at Emory University School of Medicine.
And what does that role entail?
So I'm responsible for the recruitment, training, and preparation of general pediatricians who wish to become child abuse pediatricians. So beyond the recruiting period, then once they are able to match into our program, then we train them for 3 years to be able to assess the different forms of child maltreatment, and then we present their portfolio to the American Board of Pediatrics to be able to sit for their boards in the same subspecialty.
Back in December of 2019, where were you working?
December of 2019, I was working for the University of Florida under the capacity of a pediatric hospitalist and also as a child abuse pediatrician, for which I render services at Tallahassee Child Protection Team.
Okay. And what were your duties and responsibilities in that role?
So I was responsible for overseeing the daily medical operations for the Child Protection Team. So we had a nurse practitioner who was able to provide services at the bedside or at our center. And then once the medical information was gathered, including the objective data such as laboratory studies and images, then we would work collaboratively so that way I could render a medical impression as to the question of whether child maltreatment had occurred.
Okay. And how long did you work for the child protection team?
Approximately 4 years.
Judge at this point say would tender the witness.
No questions.
I accept him as an expert in general pediatrics and child abuse pediatrics.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Pena, what was the child protection team, or is the child protection team?
So the child protection team is a medically led team that assesses cases in which there is concern, whether through allegations or through suspicion, medical suspicion, for different forms of child maltreatment. So the team assesses through forensic interviews and also medical evaluations the concerns for any of the forms of child maltreatment I mentioned previously.
And as part of your role in that collaborative process, did you engage in that process as it relates to the two children in this case?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So did you look at the medical records for the 3-year-old child, Julio?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Okay. And at the time back in December of 2019, when you assessed his case, what was his medical status?
So at that time, he was hospitalized in the pediatric ICU at Tallahassee Memorial, and he was in critical condition at that time.
Was he able to breathe on his own?
No, not based on the medical records I reviewed.
Did he also have what's called a G-tube?
Yes, based on the review of the records, that was the case.
And what is a G-tube?
The G-tube stands for gastric tube, gastric meaning stomach. So when children are expected to either accumulate a great deal of air in their stomach based on just the medical status, or they're going to be fed in small volumes, we insert a tube that is placed in the stomach and are able to use that for venting the stomach and also for feeding if that is possible.
And based on your review of his medical records, both from EMS as well as the hospital, were you able to determine how he received these injuries or how he was in this current medical state?
Yes, I became aware through multiple phone calls and also through review of the records of what had led to his medical state at that time in the ICU.
Ultimately, what would the medical diagnosis or term be for what resulted in his medical state?
So it appeared that he had sustained injuries or changes to his metabolism and brain function as a result of heat stroke.
Is that also called hyperthermia?
Well, hyperthermia is really just anything above 99.9 degrees Fahrenheit. His temperature was significantly elevated into 105, so that would meet the criteria for heat stroke temperature thresholds.
Okay. And would this type of temperature threshold and him appearing to have suffered from a heat stroke, would that affect his brain as well as his body?
Yes, it would.
Would that lead to permanent injuries or disability to this child?
It has high potential for doing so, yes. And at the time in which we were managing his care and assessing his care on my end, the expectation was that there was going to be lasting neurological changes as a result of this.
And then did you also review records, including an autopsy report for the 1-year-old child, Jonathan?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And similar to Julio, were you able to make a determination based on your training and experience? Did you agree with the diagnosis in the autopsy of his cause of death?
Yes, I did.
Dr. Pena, what happens to a child when they start to overheat?
Well, typically, it depends on the age. So which one would you want me to address first?
I guess we'll go chronologically, so the 1-year-old first.
Okay. So the 1-year-old, just based on the baby's size or a toddler size in that age group, you can anticipate that his body is going to try to compensate in many ways to try to sweat. But ultimately, they have significant restrictions from a developmental standpoint. So most likely, it would be a child that's increasingly crying, anxious, and gradually fatigued.
Okay. And how about for a 3-year-old child?
So for a 3-year-old, when you actually compare the different surface area of the body and just their size and volume of blood, then what we're seeing in Julio is much more consistent with what I would anticipate in a child that's a little older. They're able to move around the room, probably try to do things that may help them just release some of that heat. So you can see why in one scenario you're much more likely to end up with a neurological injury, while in the other scenario you're much more likely to end up with a fatality, just because the body is not able to compensate for the amount of heat, particularly in an enclosed room.
And when children, whether they're 1 or 3, both of these children were very young. In general, when children become uncomfortable, how do they react, or how do they communicate that?
Crying, excessive crying, until they can't do that anymore.
Would there eventually come a point with heat stroke where the children would pass the point of being able to cry or communicate?
Yes, as a matter of fact, really the diagnostic criteria for heat stroke is not only the temperature threshold that has to be met, meaning above 104 degrees Fahrenheit, but also you need to see a manifestation of neurological impairment, meaning that could be anything from the child is obtunded to having seizure activity or going into a coma.
But something like that wouldn't happen, automatically. It would take time for that to occur.
That is correct. The body is going to try to adjust to the changes in the environment in terms of heat, with the most rapid one really being an increase in heartbeat or heart rate, also increase in respirations, trying to get rid of as much heat as possible in that manner. And then obviously sweating. But at one point, if the temperature in the room supersedes what the body temperature is, then sweating is really not going to occur effectively to dissipate heat.
And Doctor, based on your review of the records and what you saw in this case, what is your opinion as to whether or not the injury to Julio and the death of Jonathan was preventable?
My medical opinion is that the outcome for each child was foreseeable and preventable based on what we know about heating and also about having a child in a closed room without supervision and a device that's actively producing heat.
And would, in your opinion, based on your training and experience, was this the result of neglect of the children?
Yes, this would be classified as physical neglect.
No further questions for him at this time. The defense attorney will have some questions for you, Doctor.
Cross?
Yes, sir, thank you. You might have to move to the podium, sir?
It's fine.
Just so I could turn to see you a little bit better, sir. Good afternoon. My name is Edward Iturralde. I'm an attorney. I represent Pedro Ramirez Delgado. Do you know him at all?
I do not, sir.
All right. You were testifying just a minute ago that children subjected to heat go through a bunch of medical consequences that eventually can lead to serious injury or death. How quickly can a child reach a temperature, a 1-year-old child, say, reach a temperature of 107?
There are multiple variables for that, so it would be very difficult to answer that question. I would have to know what the child was doing at the time, if the child was ill at the time. So there's a series of things that would change, essentially temperature regulation. So even though it's a great question, it would be very difficult to answer.
All right. Assume for purposes of the question that the child is enclosed in a room at 110 degrees.
Again, it would not really be about only the environment. It would be about their body and their state of hydration, their size. So because of that, the nuances of time become a little bit more elusive. I would say that just based on this age group, I would anticipate that their body is going to start responding to that temperature probably within 15 minutes.
Okay. How about the older child, a 3-year-old, to get to 105, same room conditions, 110 degrees in an enclosed room?
But once again, understanding the core body temperature, which is the critical piece here, is very challenging, even for us under ideal situations for measurement for the purpose of management. It would be difficult to know how much time, but one can anticipate at least that the body would be sweating in about 15 minutes, as I mentioned. So you can anticipate that within 15 minutes you should have some idea that the child needs an intervention.
Okay. And you mentioned that the conditions matter. So if the child was running around and then placed in a hot room, that would get him to a dangerous point quicker, correct?
It could, correct.
And there would be a difference as to whether the child was fully clothed or naked or just wearing diapers when placed into the hot room. Fair statement?
Yes, those are some of the variables that I was mentioning.
All right. What if the children were sleeping at the time the temperature is rising? Do you think that they would have the reactions that you stated of crying or moving around or trying to eliminate the heat?
I would I would anticipate the ones that are really being detected by the brain. So the area of the brain that really detects changes in environmental temperature are right in front of the eyes, or right behind the eyes, rather. So that is something that the body is programmed to do. This is not something that we do on a conscious level. So the body is detecting that heat. The brain will then do the necessary changes to ensure that there is dissipation of heat to maintain the body safe.
Which would include sweating and some of the other things you mentioned. Do you think
Correct.
do you think the increase in heat would automatically wake up a child?
It could. It depends on how the child feels, in terms of temperature. Some people, for instance, would prefer to sleep in a nice warm room, and other people would be easily woken up by that. So it would have to be based on the temperament of the child.
Okay, so it depends. It maybe could have woken them up. Maybe they could have felt, at least initially, that this is a nice warm blanket I'm sleeping in, until it got to a higher temperature.
That's cool.
All right. The child protection team, does that mainly work with the Department of Children and Families when you were here working with them?
Well, just because of the interventions often required to protect children involve defects, then yeah, that would be the case where we worked with the hospitals in the area, we worked with the different medical institutions, daycare, so it depends on who has a concern for child maltreatment.
Okay. Is the child protection team a branch or a part of government in any way?
No, it is and it isn't.
Please explain.
The child protection team in the state of Florida is part of the funding. The funding for the child protection team is a statewide system. That's not the case for all child protection teams across the state or across the country. For instance, the one that I'm in is not really in any way tied to government. It's tied to the hospital, to the healthcare system. So in Florida, it is funded by legislation, but it's not necessarily part of DFACS or the judicial system.
Okay. It's not a part of any specific agency?
No, different agencies, in fact, get the contract. So in my case, for instance, I was there as a medical director and I was faculty for University of Florida, but the daily operations were under the Children's Home Society of Florida. So as you can see, the dynamics of that are not really predictable at times.
All right. So your child protection team, the one in Tallahassee where you worked at, that's under Children's Home Society? Or was at the time. Is the Children's Home Society of Florida any kind of government agency?
I think there are some government ties, but I was never employed by them, so I don't know the nuances of their operations.
Fair enough. In addition to your duties involving child abuse, do you actually still treat patients?
I did while I was holding that position. Currently, I only serve as a consultant.
Okay, but back at this time in December of 2019, you were the child protection team doctor, expert, as well as treating ordinary patients in your practice?
Correct, in the hospital setting.
In the hospital setting. Did you perform any examination of either of these two children?
No, I strictly completed medical record reviews and autopsy reviews.
So you never even saw them?
I did not.
All right. When you were practicing with your patients, would you prescribe medication without first doing an examination?
There were times in which I couldn't complete an examination and the clinical symptoms were consistent with a diagnosis that was manageable with medication, so I have done that, but that's not often how we approach most of medicine, if you will.
Sure. You'd prefer to have actual first-hand knowledge of the patient's situation.
If you're going to treat, the expectation is that you are seeing them and that you can see them again in 48 hours to make sure that your treatment approach is adequate. So that's the standard, and that's what we aim for, but not all situations lend themselves to that.
All right. But in this case, you don't know anything other than what other people have told you. Is that fair?
Well, no, that wouldn't be fair.
Okay. What part of that is not fair? What did you learn on your own?
So I learned the primary features of the objective data really that was relevant to my analysis as a consultant. So one of the key things, as I addressed earlier in terms of the difference between hypothermia and heat stroke, so I needed to go and confirm that I was dealing with a legitimate threshold temperature for heat stroke. I also needed to confirm that he was neurologically impaired in Julio's case, so I had to make sure that he did not have additional injuries or something that would take me out of the heat being the cause of the neurological changes. And also the laboratory studies that I reviewed that were obtained at the time of his admission to the hospital. So in order for me to render an opinion, I need to look at all of the objective data to ensure that, at least in the realm of child maltreatment, I understand the objective information sufficiently to opine as to whether maltreatment has occurred or not.
Correct. And I think we're saying the same thing in different ways. You referred to tests that other people did, correct?
Well, that's all of us do that.
Okay.
So even if you're a cardiologist, you're really reading the echocardiogram or the electrocardiogram that a technician did. So we're all doing that.
All
So
right.
that's why I'm not necessarily understanding the question.
All right. And you also received information from outside the medical sphere. Would that be fair?
Yes, the various community partners updated me on situations in which they found the children, etc.
Would that include law enforcement?
That would include law enforcement.
And you prepared some reports, is that correct?
When a nurse practitioner prepared the reports, I finalized with a medical impression.
All right, and you signed?
Only the death review was completely done by me.
All right. And I see the one for Julio Montesinos is signed by you. The copy that I have for the other child, the Jonathan Delgado, has your signature line, but it's not signed, but that may be just the one that I have. Did you sign both of them?
Yes, pretty much the first one for Julio, both the nurse practitioner and I signed because both of us worked on that report together. The one for Jonathan was just me.
Okay. And do you have a copy of that report with you there?
I do, yes.
All right. So on the Jonathan Delgado case, on page 2, there's a paragraph that says impressions, fatal neglect. And then it says JC, Jaycee. Who is JC?
That was probably from one of the templates, but that's supposed to say Jonathan.
Okay, so that's a cut and paste error?
No, it's primarily the actual template. So some of them actually do have that, but it's not really that you're copying and pasting the name. It's that it unfortunately didn't get picked up.
So the template has the name JC built into the template?
In this particular case, probably the previous death review template had the name, and it was not picked up.
Okay. And then later on in that same sentence, it says that he was found in a room with 2 space heaters that were left turned on. Was that regarding Jonathan Delgado or JC?
No, both of these reports are for Julio and Jonathan. And my understanding is that there were 2 heaters in the room.
All right. Do you recall how you got that understanding?
Through the conversations with law enforcement and defects that we had.
All right. Any particular report or person that you recall? And I understand it's been some time, you may not recall.
Yeah, no, most of these cases are staffed or were staffed over the phone with me, so I don't have the names. That's usually something that someone else would keep track of.
I think I'm done, but if the court and you would allow me to speak to my client one moment to see if he has anything to add, I'll be right back. No further questions. Thank you.
Redirect.
Yes, sir. I just have a couple more questions. Doctor, can you still hear me all right?
I can, yes, thanks for asking.
No problem. Want to make sure you can actually hear what I'm asking you. I know Mr. Iturralde asked you about the 2 heaters issue. Fair to say that that just might have been a miscommunication with law enforcement?
Objection,
Yeah, I
speculation.
mean,
No, it's a fair question based on your questions.
You can answer, Doctor.
so yes, it was a detail that was provided to me at the time. Ultimately, whether it was 1 or 2 would be irrelevant. What I really care about the most for my assessment is the child's temperature and the room temperature that was confirmed.
Okay.
How it got to those temperatures is really not something that will go into my calculus.
Gotcha. So would you rely on the evidence that we or law enforcement retrieved from the scene as to the actual number of heaters that there were?
Yes, that's not necessarily medical information. That would be more from an investigative aspect, which I don't do.
Okay. And Mr. Iturralde also asked you about the fact that you never personally saw the children, but I think you had mentioned part of your process is collaborative, and you mentioned a nurse that you work with. Would she or he have personally observed the patient before speaking with you?
Yes, that is the case. Anytime that, for instance, when you look at the report for Julio, it says medical evaluation and medical records review. So that would tell you that, yes, that she did a physical exam and saw the child in some capacity, and then I completed a medical record.
Okay. And he was also asking you about how quickly the children, would reach that temperature. Do you remember that line of questioning?
I do.
And I think you had said that they would start responding to an increase in temperature in about 15 minutes. Is that fair?
That would be a reasonable time for
Okay.
detecting something needed to change, yes.
And when you say they would start responding to temperature, like that doesn't mean that their body temperature reaches like 107 in 15 minutes. It just means their body has started to notice the increase in temperature in the room.
That is correct.
Okay. So it would take actually longer than that 15 minutes, obviously.
Objection leading.
Don't leave.
Would it take longer than 15 minutes for their bodies to reach that internal temperature that high?
Yes, the body, as I mentioned, is going to start going through a series of steps to try to get rid of the heat. So in 15 minutes, it would be reasonable to at least anticipate sweating to occur. But at one point, as I mentioned earlier, if the environment is hotter than the body temperature, then sweating starts to kind of just not occur anymore. And at that point, we have no idea how long it would actually take for internally the core body temperature to increase to 106 or 106.5, as it was documented in some of the records.
Okay. That would be based on various factors.
That's correct.
I don't have any other questions for him.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, doctor. You are free to go.
Okay, thank you very much.
The state's next witness is Marsha Dollard.
If you'll face this lady and raise your right hand, please.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Have a seat up here, ma'am.
May I proceed, Judge?
Absolutely.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Can you just make sure that you speak nice and loud and clear into that microphone right in front of you? Can you please introduce yourself to the jury?
My name is Marsha Doard.
Ms. Dollard, did you adopt a child by the name of Julio?
Yes.
And was that his name back at the time, Julio Monteceros Ramos, I believe?
Well, yeah. Julio Ramos Montesinos.
Okay.
Can you all hear this witness? Try
you-
to get a little closer to the microphone.
Yeah.
Speak loud enough so the
Julio
last
Ramos
juror down there can
Montesinos.
hear you.
And how long have you been caring for him?
I've been caring for him for a little over 4 years.
Okay.
I brought him home from the hospital.
Okay. Did you provide me with a recent photograph of him as well as a recent video of him?
Yes.
Okay. Judge, at this time, state would ask to move states 5 and 6 into evidence. I don't believe there's an objection.
That is correct, no objection.
So received.
May I publish?
Absolutely.
This is states 5. Miss Dollard, is that your son, Julio?
Yes.
Is he wheelchair bound?
Yes.
Can you see the screen, Miss Dollard?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. This video that was taken, where was this taken at?
It was taken at his occupational therapy.
Is that something that he has to do on a routine basis?
Yes, occupational, physical, and speech therapy.
Miss Dollard, how old is Julio in that video?
8.
So he was 8 years old.
Mhm.
Is that a yes?
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, I can understand what you're saying, just the court reporter has to write it down. I don't have any other questions for her.
Cross?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
My name is Edward Iturralde. I represent Pedro Ramirez Alvarado. God bless you for what you've done adopting this child and taking care of him. I just editorializing, but sorry. How long have you had him now?
I got him in, I became his foster parent in January of 2020.
So not long after the incident. Were you involved in the DCF, Department of Children and Families case here in court?
What?
Were you involved in the dependency case here in the Leon County Courthouse regarding this child?
I didn't come to court for any of that.
Okay, you never came to court. Would they notify you of ongoing
Well, it
proceedings?
was during COVID, though, so I guess I wouldn't have came to court.
Okay.
Well, I did a few court with everything, yeah.
All right. Were you giving notice of the different court dates that were
Yes.
happening?
Yes.
And during COVID, would they allow you to participate
Yes,
electronically
through,
via Zoom or whatever?
Yeah, Zoom.
Okay. So you went to some of those hearings as the representative for the child?
Yeah, as the foster parent.
As the foster parent? Okay. In that case, that was against Brittany Delgado, the mom, is that correct?
No, if I remember correctly, she gave up her rights shortly after the incident. So it was really with,
I'll get to the father in a second.
Okay.
But I'm just trying to confirm with you. Brittany Delgado was the mother, and she was involved in the case.
Yes, but
And-
she wasn't at any of the hearings that I went to.
Okay, but you found out either through court records or otherwise that she gave up custody of the children, and that's how you got to be a permanent mother of that child.
Yeah, she went ahead and gave up her rights. I
All
don't know, I think she thought it might look good on her or something.
All right. Then there's a gentleman named Rafael Antonio Delgado Escobar. Was that the name you were thinking of?
I don't know. I don't remember that. Say that again?
Rafael
Raphael, I remember Raphael.
Antonio Delgado Escobar. I know it's lots of names,
Yeah,
but
I only knew Raphael Esteban.
Escobar?
Estebar.
Okay. So just like the first name and the last name without the middle stuff.
Yeah, I didn't know the other two names, no.
Okay. He was in court as the father, and he did proceed a little bit more than Miss Delgado.
Yes, but he was in El Salvador.
Okay.
I think it's El Salvador.
Okay. And ultimately, his parental rights were also terminated.
Yes,
And that's after both of them were done. Now it's really official. You're the mother of this child.
yeah, well, then we had to do the adoption case, so, but I was,
You're correct. So there was a subsequent or related adoption case that made it official.
yes.
Okay. As the mother, or either the current mother, adopted mother, or as the foster mother, were you given access to his medical records
I have not received any prior medical records.
You have not. And have you tried to?
I mean, I hadn't even got the,
It's okay if you haven't. I'm just asking.
I don't.
Okay. So you wouldn't know if he had any developmental delays before you took custody of him?
I wouldn't, I guess you can say I wouldn't know.
Okay. Nothing further. Thank you, ma'am. And again, thank you for the work you did.
I do know he could walk and talk
Okay.
beforehand.
Redirect.
Ms. Dollard, can he walk and talk now?
No.
No further questions.
Thank you, ma'am. You may step down.
She's free to go. State calls Dr. Lee Bashong.
If you would face this lady, sir. Sir, if you face this lady, raise your right hand.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
Have a seat up here, sir.
All right, thank you, sir.
May I proceed, Judge?
Absolutely.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Can you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Yes, I sure will. My name is Lee Bashong.
And Mr. Bashong, where do you work?
I'm a professor at Florida A&M University. I teach forensics and criminal justice.
How long have you been doing that?
Going on 7 years now.
Can you tell us your educational background, please?
Yes, ma'am. So I have a PhD. My PhD is in criminal justice. My master's degree has a kind of a bifurcated focus. On one hand was human remains identification and trauma analysis, and on the other hand I did some forensics work. I'm also, I've got a bachelor's in psychology, and I'm a, I suppose I should stop there. Go ahead.
So, fair to say you're kind of a jack of all trades?
More or less, ma'am. Kind of like a German Shepherd.
And ultimately, did you get involved through the Leon County Sheriff's Office in the investigation of this case?
Yes, ma'am, I did. I was contacted shortly after Christmas, I think, and they asked me to weigh in as to whether or not I could give some insight as to what happened to these young boys.
And I guess specifically what training or education do you have that is relevant to the work that you did in this case?
That could be a long answer, so bear with me. I am former law enforcement. I've got over 2,000 hours of advanced training in law enforcement. I was a career investigator, chiefly in homicide, and narcotics is where I spent most of my investigations. Through that, or aside from that, I'm also a member of the American Academy of Forensic Sciences, where there is a process to be vetted before you are accepted into that particular organization. And there's certain trainings and certain expectations that we have to maintain our status in that relationship. I'm also a member of FEMORS, the Florida Emergency Mortuary Operational Response System. So if you think of any big events, Hurricane Ian, Pulse nightclub, Fort Lauderdale when the towers came down, those types of things. Our roles and responsibilities are very diverse with that organization. But at the end of the day, it's claiming all of those individuals that have been injured in whatever incident it may be, identifying them, determining the way that they died, because God forbid we wouldn't want to have a homicide buried in something like that. And we conduct annual training, and I've been with them now for 11, 12 years maybe, and we do annual training every year in that regard also.
As your current position as a professor, do you also do research?
I do research. So we work in what I like to call applied forensics. That's my focus, applied forensics, right? So a lot of the times students will come to us with an expectation, right? Something they see on TV, Law and Order or NCIS or something like that. And the way that I kind of counteract what's on television with what happens in real life is that I involve them in research. So we do all sorts of research. But most of the research that I've done or that I'll generate is related to death investigation in some way, shape, or form. And in this particular case, I did research relating to this case, and it was published.
Okay. And that was going to be my next question. Did you write a paper based upon the work and the research that you did in this case?
Yes, I did. So through the American Academy of Forensic Sciences, they have a journal that they publish. It's called the Journal of Forensic Sciences, right? And this case was a unique case for me as an academic in that I couldn't find anything in the literature that was similar to this particular case. And so, yes, I did. I took my findings, I wrote them, I submitted it. It went before peer review, and peer review is when there's other people of the same discipline. They'll focus in on the paper and see if it's scientifically sound, has merit, and contributes to the literature as a whole. And I did do that, and it was accepted, and it was published, and I believe you might have a copy of it.
Yes. So this paper was ultimately published in the Journal of Forensic Science.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And the research and the work that you did, as well as what you put in your paper, was that based upon facts and data that you compiled yourself as well as researched?
Yes. So I'm sure we'll get into it, but the data that I collected, there was a methodology to it. And the methods that I selected have been what I would call tried and true methods that are not only accepted in the forensic disciplines, but in the discipline of physics as well. And so, to answer the question, yes.
Okay. And so, you anticipated my next question, which was going to be, were the methods that you used throughout this case reliable in your subject area?
I believe they were reliable. Not only me, but the blind review process, the reviewers thought that they were reliable as well.
And clearly the methods that were chosen and peer-reviewed are the methods that you applied to this case.
Correct.
Judge, at this time, the state would tender the witness.
What year?
Sure.
Sir, you indicated that you have a PhD in criminal justice and a master's in human remains and forensics. Is that right?
Human remains identification and trauma analysis, but yes, sir. Close
Okay,
enough.
I thought the forensics word was thrown in there, but maybe I missed it. Is that what your degree says?
My degree says Masters of Science Forensics.
Masters of Science Forensics.
Yes.
It doesn't say the other stuff.
No, those would be on the transcripts.
Okay. You have no medical background, do you?
My medical background is in medical legal death investigation, and I probably pushing on 30 years of experience in that realm now.
But you didn't go to medical school, did you?
No, I didn't.
Did you take any classes to get a degree in biology?
I do not. I see where you're going, sir. I don't have a degree in biology or chemistry or physics.
Mathematics or engineering?
No, sir. I told you what my degrees were.
No further questions at this stage.
Counsel?
I would object to this witness being considered an expert in anything other than forensics.
Anything from the state?
Judge, I would say that I think his qualifications are in applied forensics, which is what I anticipate he will be testifying to in this case.
Well, over objection, I'm going to receive him as an expert in applied forensics and forensic science.
Thank you, Your Honor. So, Dr. Bashong, I guess I want to start from the beginning. Did you go to the scene of the crime in this case?
I did. The detectives had asked, excuse me, bit of a frog, I apologize. Detectives had called me and said that they had secured a search warrant to go back to the scene afterwards. Like I told you, I think that was somewhere between Christmas and New Year's 2019. I did go out, I believe it was on January 2nd of 2020. Met with law enforcement at the scene. They had the power turned back on to the location. The location's power was off. They had coordinated with whoever, the Talquin Electric or whatever it was, to turn it back on. They had brought back a particular piece of equipment that was in the house at the time. It was a space heater. And I had brought some data recording devices with me, with the understanding of and what they wanted to know was how quickly did that room heat up. That's really what they wanted to know. So we
And I'm sorry, I don't mean to stop you. I was going to show you some photographs.
Yes, please.
Judge, may I approach the witness?
Sure.
This is states 3A through F.
Okay, thank you.
May I approach the witness?
Absolutely.
Thank you, ma'am.
Doctor, just let me know if you recognize those.
Yes, ma'am. There's 6 photographs here, and I do recognize all of them.
Would those be photos that were taken during the time that you conducted your analysis at the residence?
Yes.
Okay. Judge, at this time, state would ask to move states 3A through F into evidence.
Counsel?
Objection, foundation.
Who took the pictures? They have foundation.
I mean, you didn't take these pictures, did you?
I did not take these
Okay.
pictures.
Do they fairly and accurately represent the scene as you saw it that night and your equipment, which can be seen in the photos?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Judge, now State would ask me if States 3A through F into evidence.
No objection.
Received.
May I publish?
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Starting with States 3A. Can you see that, Doctor? I know there's a little bit of a glare.
Yes, I have it here, but it's not up there.
I think the jurors can see it. It's the projector's
Oh,
off,
okay,
but
okay.
yes. Thank you for checking, though. I appreciate that. Would this just be the exterior of the residence?
Yes, ma'am.
Not sure if I stated, but that was 3A for the record. States 3B.
So these two instruments are Kestrel data loggers, and they take recordings of the environment, both in terms of temperature, humidity, heat stress indices, things of this nature. And these will download their data into an Excel document, which I'm sure you'll see at some point in time, right? But these are the two instruments that I used then, and I still use these today, in order to capture environmental data.
Are these pieces of equipment like certified or anything?
They are. I'm not going to use something that wasn't certified, and they come with a certificate of conformity from the manufacturer that these are actually calibrated to certain scientific standards.
So are these what you use to collect your data in this case?
I did. These are the two.
States 3C. From your days as a police officer, are you familiar with what this photo is showing?
This will be a piece of evidence that was seized by law enforcement at some point in time in their investigation. And this was what they had actually brought back to the scene for us to be able to try to get an accurate read of what this machine that's inside of there, it's a space heater, what this machine, how it interacted with the environment, temperature, and so on and so forth.
States 3D.
This is the room that the two children were in, and you'll see that these instruments are placed on the floor. There's one on the left side of the screen, kind of like in the middle of the room, and this was placed here because this is where the children supposedly had been laying that particular night. And then to capture a more holistic snapshot of the room itself, I placed one up against the wall on the other side to try to see what how much temperature difference there might be, say if a kid had rolled away from the heat to the wall or something like that. So both of these were placed where they are with purpose.
States 3E.
So in a couple of pictures ago, you saw that paper bag that had the red evidence tape. This little black box over here. This is the space heater that was supposedly present during the event, and you'll see that the data logger is placed just outside of the direct range of the heater. In other words, the heater's not going to be blowing directly onto the instrument.
And states 3F. Is this just looking with the person's back kind of at that purple wall looking towards where the door would be?
Right, and you can actually see on the left-hand side, there's a little piece of wood there. That's actually the bedroom door. So it's just another view of the room.
So, how long did you let the space heater run, and how often did you or did those devices record a change in temperature?
So the devices were put into play, excuse me, right about 8:50 p.m. on the night of January the 2nd. And we took 10-minute increments of readings, I would say. And we allowed this to run from that time throughout the evening into the next morning. And then we called it at about 1:30 p.m. That's where we said we had enough data to be able to move forward. So, wait a minute here. 8 to 1. Yeah, so about 17 hours of total readings.
Now, before you, I guess, once you got the data, before you started your analysis, were there some assumptions that you had to make based on what you had?
I think the biggest assumption that we had to make in this case is based in the lack of some data that we didn't have. And I'll tell you what I'm talking about. We didn't know whether or not at the onset, if the children were put into a room that was already at thermal saturation, or was the room cold and then they had to heat it up. And so I actually ran two different analyses, one assuming that the temperature in the room was at max capacity for that 1500 watt space heater, and the other one is that it was at ambient temperature, or what it was outside. So if I remember correctly, that night the temperature, the night of the incident, the temperature was like 68, 70 degrees Fahrenheit, right, somewhere in that time frame. It wasn't that much different on the day that we did it, right? I mean, so a couple of weeks later, or whatever the case may be, that we were actually able to run the experiment. The temperatures of the night that I did the experiment weren't much different than the temperatures of the night of the incident.
Okay.
So that was a major assumption.
So, number one, even though it was December and January, this is also Florida, fair?
Yes.
So it wasn't particularly cold.
It wasn't February in Tallahassee yet, so we still had some moderate temperature.
And you mentioned thermal saturation, and I just want to make sure for members of the jury who may not understand what that means, because you mentioned, that term. What does thermal saturation mean?
So thermal saturation just means that the room is at the point of the max temperature that it can hold with the amount of energy that was being put into it. In other words, the space heater could only bring it up to a certain degree. It couldn't go any further, right? An example would be, we all cook, right? And if you put your pot of water on the little burner in the back of your stove and you try to heat up a spaghetti pot or, a crab boil or something like, it's not going to heat all the way up, right? That's because the thermal saturation from that little burner back there has reached its max capacity, which isn't at the 220 boiling point yet. So you move it to a larger burner to increase the ability for it to take on more heat and boil.
And then I think you clarified, but just want to make sure, you also mentioned ambient temperature as the other assumption.
Yes.
And what is ambient temperature?
And ambient temperature is just the natural temperature that it is outside. Okay, it's not been influenced by anything. It's just your outdoor temperature.
Before conducting your analysis, did you also review literature regarding hyperthermia
I did, yes.
and heat stroke?
Yes.
Was that important to your analysis?
Well, it was. At some point prior to conducting all the analyses, I started to get data in, right? I got data in from the medical examiner's office. So I had all the medical examiner reports. I had the hospital reports. I had the first responder reports, which included law enforcement, paramedics, and firefighter reports, and so on and so forth. And based off of the rectal temperature of the decedent, an assumption then was that the children had suffered a hyperthermic event. Hyperthermia is when the body's core temperature is raised to such a level that it becomes unable to sustain life, for lack of better words, right? And there's different lingos that we'll use. Sometimes you'll hear heat stroke or heat exhaustion. These are just different levels, if we will, of hyperthermia. But if the environment remains as such that the temperature isn't dissipated or the child isn't removed out of there, or whatever living thing is in there, eventually it's going to die. And so that was what I was asked to look for, was this room capable of hosting a temperature sufficient enough that it's incompatible with life, to also review the medical reports and see if it's consistent with the literature, and those things I did do.
Did you also look at, based on that, not only the medical documents we have in this case, but literature on how human beings' bodies regulate temperature and things of that nature?
Yes, I did. And I had incorporated a lot of that into the report, which I have a feeling we're going to be getting into shortly.
So what, I guess, briefly and basically explain to us the model that you used to analyze this data.
So there's a couple different ones. I think the main important one, though, is going to be what we call Gagg's two-node model. And there it looks at the human body in terms of cylinders. And I know that's going to sound really weird, but we have an inside cylinder, a core, right? And then encasing that is another cylinder, we'll call that the skin, right? And so the temperature regulation, it's a very dynamic process. But the temperature, the human body attempts to regulate the temperature by either taking on energy or heat from the environment or releasing it, right? And so what the body does is it will dissipate heat, since that's what we're talking about. The core temperature is going to push the heat to the skin, okay? So the inner cylinder is going to push it to the outer cylinder by way of blood, right? And then from there, we have sweating, right? And sweating, and if there's moving air and it's not excessively humid, the sweating will evaporate, which results in cooling of the body, right?
Objection. It's outside the scope of his expertise.
It is. Move on.
So what is the model that you used? Tell us.
It's Gagg's model, right? And it assumes all the things I just told you.
So is this a model that is used in forensic science?
It is, and most of the fatal hyperthermic literature cases or literature involving those that are published and accessible by anybody uses that model.
And does your education, training, and experience allow you to integrate the data you received into that model?
Of course.
Okay. Did you take into account at all the specific ages or sizes of the children?
I did. So the report, and my focus in this case, so that y'all know, is on the child that died. Okay, I didn't really focus too much on the other young boy, and I'm sorry, Counselor, restate the question.
Sure. My question was whether or not you took into account the age and the size of the child.
The size.
Yeah.
And the size of the child became very important, right? And in determining the surface area of the child's skin relative to his size and the environment, I had to incorporate that, and there's a standard by which we do that. And I think so to determine the actual body surface, we use an equation, if you will. It's called the Du Bois method, right? And it uses a function of height and weight to estimate the body area for the child. To kind of give you just a little bit of an understanding, most adults have an average of about 1.7 meters squared of surface area on their body, right, that can dissipate heat. Whereas this young boy only had 0.7 meters squared, so significantly smaller. I couldn't use a full-grown person model to try to explain what was going on to a 14-month-old, right? So there's some difference there.
And you mentioned, I think, that equation is something that is standard practice to be used.
Very standard, and it's been cited over and over and over and over again. Yeah.
For your two different roads of analysis that you conducted, did you take into account some other factors? And I'll just kind of go through them with you if that's okay. Did you take into account more than the child's size?
Oh, yes. Sorry, guys, that thing in my throat. Not only with the child size, but we had to look at the room, the dynamics of the room. We had to look at the space heater, the dynamics of the space heater. We had to look at the temperature of that room, which in order to accurately do that, we had to go outside and see what the temperature was out there. Again, we didn't know. Was the child placed into the room and the room was already at, over 100 degrees Fahrenheit at saturation, or was it 68 degrees, right? And we had to take those into consideration. So the model applied for both of those scenarios. The only difference is what was the starting point of the temperature. That was the only difference.
Did you take into account things like radiative heat loss?
For the room, you're asking? Yeah, for the room. And yes, we had to take into account of that. Much as there are the two cylinders that we're looking at the ability for the room itself to be able to dispel heat to some degree. And one key thing that I honed in on out of the original investigation by law enforcement and everybody else was that law enforcement, in their report, I read that law enforcement felt that the room was so hot that it felt like they were walking into a wall of heat. And then I also read in a report that the firefighters took and I don't know if it was a Dragar, but that's kind of the industry standard. It's a heat sensor, right? You can point it at a wall, or they're easy to get now. But they took readings in the room, and if I recall correctly, it was roughly an hour after they had arrived on scene, and the room still had a very high elevated temperature. I believe it was somewhere around 100 degrees Fahrenheit. I believe.
Okay. Fair to say that you took into account numerous factors and variables when conducting your analysis?
We had to. Anything that potentially could change the way that the data outputs was of critical importance, considering the gravity of the case, both for the child and the defendant, to be able to explain it with what we call a fair degree of scientific certainty. And that's about as accurate as you can get in science, right? Is that this is what happened based on all of the knowns that we had at that particular time, and taking into consideration the behaviors of the different materials, the heaters, the walls, the whatever the case may be. I was certain to ensure that this was thorough, right? Has to be thorough.
And fair to say this also included quite a bit of math?
It did.
Did you use, for all of the factors and variables that we've discussed, as well as any others, did you use standard equations for all of these variables?
Every one of them. And when I was researching these equations also, I think it's important to say is that I didn't pick one that had just been published or put out there. I used, everything was time and time and time again, replicated in different studies and in different fields, or whatever the case may be. I believe that what we used to come to these conclusions was the best way of explaining what happened.
So what was the peak? I forget the word that you used, but
Saturation?
yes, the temperature saturation, the highest point that this room reached throughout your experiment.
So we're looking at, on one was 41 degrees Celsius, so 108-ish on the Fahrenheit scale, and the other one we reached 39. 39.7 at its peak. So roughly the same temperature. Very hot, let's put it that way.
So I think you said that was about 108 degrees, is that Fahrenheit?
Roughly,
Okay.
roughly, yeah.
Is all of what you did you take your measurements in Celsius?
I do, in the scientific community, for whatever reason, the prescribed is using Celsius, like using metrics and so on and so forth. So everything I took was in Celsius, easily converted back to Fahrenheit.
Okay. And so I think you had mentioned part of what you were trying to figure out is how hot the room could get.
How hot and how long it took to reach that temperature in the boys, right? How long did they have to be in the ultimate question was, how long were they in that room to invoke fatal hyperthermia or near fatal hyperthermia? And that's what this answered.
Okay. So
Objection again to outside the scope of his expertise.
Overruled.
So I want to start with your analysis or your opinion on if the room started at its peak temperature, which I think you said was about 107 degrees Fahrenheit, when the children were placed into the room. How long would it have taken for their body temperature, specifically the child who is deceased, to have reached that point?
And that's roughly 45 minutes.
Now, how about if the children, or this one child specifically, was placed into the room when it was at ambient temperature and the heater was turned on and the room heated up? How long would that take?
We're looking at roughly 2 hours and 45 minutes.
And that, is that fair to say that's like the minimum of what it would have taken?
Yes.
So depending on the specific child and taking into all the variables and things, it could have taken longer.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I couldn't control for things, just so that you all know, I couldn't control for things like hydration, right? A person sweats, but at some point in time, sweat stops, right? Whether it's temperature induced or their body fluids become so low. I couldn't control for that because I didn't know. I didn't know I didn't know how hydrated they were. So these ranges that we put in here are what I would consider to be the baseline threshold, if you will, if that makes sense.
May I have just a moment, Judge?
Sure.
That's all I have for him for now.
Ross?
Yes, sir, thank you. Good afternoon, Dr. Bashong.
Good afternoon, sir.
We haven't met. My name is Edward Iturralde. I'm an attorney representing Pedro Ramirez Alvarado. You mentioned that you purchased these devices, that you took the measurements, and that they were certified as calibrated by the manufacturer.
Correct.
When did you purchase these devices?
5 days before?
Okay. So they were brand new to you?
Brand new.
All right, perfect. Did you do, and I think you did, you mentioned that you did research in preparing for doing your report?
Well, yes, sir. After we took the readings, and I had collected the data, right, then it was time to sit down and determine what was the most sound way to interpret this. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, but the question is, did you do research?
Of course I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
And research into hypothermia?
Yes.
All right. By any chance, did you discover a preliminary analysis of hypothermia deaths associated with electric room and space heaters published March 2019 by the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission?
No.
You did not find that in your research?
No. Is there something you'd like me to look at?
I mean, I don't know how much time everybody wants to spend on it, but you're free to look at it. If you'd like to manage it.
Well,
Won't take me long here. Just let me kind of flip through this real quick. All right, that's enlightening, sir. Here you go.
All right, thank you. May I?
sure.
So I'd asked you if you had done research into hypothermia. This did not show up on your list, but I didn't ask you if you had done any research into space heaters to prepare your report. Did you do research on space heaters or any other kind of heaters?
Wasn't germane to what I was focusing on that with this particular time. Doesn't matter to me whether it was a small space heater or a big space heater. The question is, how long did that space heater have to be on and those children in that room? Doesn't matter to me what the make or the model or the brand or what their functions are, or like the report you just gave me, it says that it can heat a room up to what, 117 degrees? Did you read that? Page 16?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it doesn't matter to me what the device was. What matters to me was the end product, what happened.
Well, would you think it's fair to say that a bigger heater would heat the room at a quicker time?
I think that's entirely accurate.
And would it be fair to say that different heaters might have different top temperatures, and so that may be a factor?
Sure it would. However, the heater we used was the heater that was in the room the night of the death.
Correct.
And that's what I was studying. I don't care about the other heaters. I cared about that heater.
All right. Do you have any prior experience in doing research regarding space heaters at all? I assume no, but I don't know.
No, I've never researched a space heater except maybe when I go to buy one or something.
All right. Did you pay attention at all to any warnings that may have been on this particular space heater?
I I don't care about that. I cared about what the space heater did.
Please just answer the question and don't editorialize, sir.
Sir, you asked me a question, I'm answering.
The question is, did you see if there were any warnings on the machine?
I didn't examine the machine.
Very good, thank you. Did you ever obtain a manual of that heater?
Wasn't relevant to what I was doing.
All right, so that was a no.
That's a no.
You testified as to the placement of your temperature measuring devices, and specifically noted that you put it outside the direct blow of the heater.
That's right, the one that was the closest to it.
All right. If the child was in the direct blow of the heater, they would have gotten hotter faster, yes?
Yes, sir.
How did you determine where the children were placed in the room?
Law enforcement.
How did law enforcement determine how the children were placed in the room?
I think you're asking the wrong witness, sir.
All right. Did it have, you mentioned you looked at a lot of different reports. Did any of the reports indicate where the children were present in the room?
So my understanding is that the children, at the time law enforcement arrived, that the children were outside of the house. I think one was having CPR done to it, and the other one, I don't know what was happening. But I'm, again, so that you understand, I'm going off what information was presented to me in good faith.
Sure. I mean, if someone told you this is where the kid was, you took that at face value.
That's right.
You didn't know that that's where the kid was or not.
No. My first time in that house was on the day, on January 2nd. That's my first time. I wasn't there for all the rest.
Absolutely. And in fact, whoever may have told you where the children were didn't know, because when the police got there, as you mentioned, the children were already in the front yard.
But, in all fairness, since we're talking speculation, the children could have been in the house when law enforcement got there. I don't know. You're asking me the wrong questions, Counselor.
I don't think I am, because you just testified.
Counsel, move on.
Yes, sir. We were talking about ambient temperatures, and you said that you recalled that it was about 68, 70 on both the night that you did your test and the night in question. Was that accurate?
There were some discrepancies. I actually think, if I'm not mistaken, and I could refresh here, but I think it was a little bit warmer on the day that we did it.
All right.
I'm sorry, go ahead, sir.
And when you're giving that temperature, that's the temperature at the start time of your starting to take the measurements and turning the machine on. Is that correct?
Outside the house? Yes, but there's an explanation. If you look at the data charts, right? And there's a certain time I said that it starts, that we started the experiment. There are readings before that. Those readings before that were capturing the temperature outside the house.
As you were walking in with the devices.
Right. Then the first reading at the time that we started it was 850, I think. That's the temperature that's inside the house. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
How do you know what the temperature was on the day of the incident?
National weather records.
All right. And what time was that particular temperature? Did you look for the low, the high, a certain time of day?
For that evening, oh boy, you're taking me back now. I know I went to the National Weather Service, and I believe they have hourly or something like that. And again, this is one of the assumptions that I was telling you guys about, right? 68 degrees, but let's say for a minute that it was 69 degrees or 66 degrees. It's not going to influence what happened in the house dramatically. It's not like the sun was shining down on the house, right?
You made, and you testified to, some assumptions that you made in order to do your experiment. One of them, as discussed with the state, was whether the room was hot or cold, because we don't know.
We don't know.
And so you did a hot test and a cold test.
Correct.
All right. If you had started your test in the middle of the day when the sun is out and the outside ambient temperature is higher, would it be safe to assume that the indoor ambient temperature would also be higher, assuming no external sources of heat or cold?
I think that's fair to say.
All right. So if you turn on the heater and it's already 70, 80 degrees, it would heat up the room quicker than when you start at 60 degrees.
Yes, sir.
All right. Another assumption that you made regarding the kids, do you know if they were clothed or naked?
Personally, again, I'm going off good faith what was told to me, and it's my understanding that they were naked save for a diaper on one and a pair of underwear on the other.
So that's an assumption that you made based on information given to you by others?
Yes.
If they were wearing other clothes or had a blanket on them or anything like that, that would have increased their temperature quicker, yes?
And not only that, would have reduced the ability for them to dissipate the heat.
So it would have a double effect?
Yes.
All right. And we don't know whether they had blankets on them or other clothes on them or not?
Asked and answered, but I'll do it again. I was told that one was in a diaper and one was wearing underwear, and there was nothing else.
And was another assumption that the kids were at rest when the heating started versus had they been running around and playing?
And so and I see you're going with this, Counselor, and for the jury, the information that was presented to me is that the children had been put into that room after they came back, the caregivers came back, I think from Panama City or Pensacola or something like that, right? And put them in the room, and the next morning, this happened. I know there's another story out there that the kids were playing 5 minutes before EMS showed up, which is, in my opinion, a physical impossibility.
Thank you for your opinion. But the question was whether the kids were asleep or playing. That would make a difference, yes?
Physical activity would.
All right, thank you. Do you know how long the heater was actually on leading to the injury of the children?
No, sir, I don't know that.
It could have been hours, it could have been 45 minutes, it could have been 2 hours and 45 minutes, it could have been all night long.
I don't know.
You don't know. Do you know who turned it on?
I do not.
Do you know who put the kids in there?
I do not.
All right, thank you, nothing further.
Thank you, sir.
Ready to wreck?
Doctor, was the space heater operable when you conducted your experiment?
It was operable. Like I said, law enforcement took it out, plugged it in, it turned on, it did its thing. Yes, ma'am.
No further questions.
Thank you, sir. You may step down.
Thank you.
And he's free to go for today. I have his contact information.
Very good, Daddy.
Yeah, yeah. The state would call Dustin Brock. Unless the jury would like to take a comfort break. I know we kind of been going for a while now. I don't know if anybody needs to use the bathroom.
Need a break? Okay. Anytime any of you need a break, just raise your hand. All right, let's get back at 3:40, do it? Okay, during the break, don't discuss the case among yourselves or allow anyone to discuss it in your presence.
Good call. That's right after lunch. And I don't know if you're ever
20 of.
I did. I emailed it.
Okay, I didn't see it, but
I responded to your email.
but I've been here.
Is he out there?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna go to the bathroom.
Okay. How many more witnesses do you propose?
Judge, I just have one more witness. I've actually decided to remove Kyle Stockton as well as Mr. Andrade, so I only have Dustin Brock left. He is the lead investigator, and he will be my final witness, and I shall rest after him.
Okay?
Oh, sorry. I didn't realize the interpreters weren't here.
So
I'll say it again.
my question was, how many more witnesses did you have?
Are you guys ready? Are you? Okay. I was saying I have removed Kyle Stockton from my witness list, as well as Christopher Andrade. So the lead detective, Dustin Brock, will be my final witness, and I will rest after that.
All right. We
Sorry,
ready for the jury?
Yes, sir.
Let's bring them on.
No, you can put it up.
All right, jury. Be seated, please. Y'all haven't discussed the case among yourselves. No one's discussed in your presence. Good. Call your next witness.
The state calls Dustin Brock.
If you'll face this lady and raise your right hand, sir.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Have a seat up here, sir.
May I proceed, Judge?
Absolutely.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Can you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Yes, ma'am. I'm Deputy Dustin Brock, the Leon County Sheriff's Office.
And how long have you worked for the sheriff's office?
About 18 years.
What positions have you held with the sheriff's office?
A patrol deputy, school resource deputy, a sex offender detective, special victims detective, a violent crimes detective, and an internal affairs detective. And currently I'm serving as a bailiff to one of the county judges here at the courthouse.
Back in December of 2019, what was your position at the sheriff's office?
I was at that time a detective with the violent crimes unit at the sheriff's office.
Were you assigned as the lead detective in the investigation of this case?
Yes, I was.
And that was for the state of Florida versus Brittany Delgado and Pedro Ramirez Alvarado?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you see Mr. Ramirez Alvarado in the courtroom?
I do.
Can you please point to where he's sitting and identify something that he's wearing?
Yes, he's sitting here to my right. He has a pair of headphones on with dark curly hair, Hispanic male.
Let the record reflect the witness has identified the defendant.
So reflects.
Deputy Brock, did you respond to the scene on December 10th, 2019?
Yes, I did.
Did you observe this defendant as well as Miss Delgado there?
Yes, I did.
When you arrived, were the children still on scene?
No, they were not.
Throughout your investigation and as the lead detective, do you review numerous things collected from other officers when you're reviewing and compiling your case report?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you familiar with the two children in question, the two victims in this case?
Yes.
Judge may approach the witness.
Yes.
This is states 9A and B for ID only at this point.
I saw him, thanks.
States 9.
Yes, sir. And okay. Do you recognize what is, or are those photographs?
Yes, they are photographs.
Okay. Did you take those photographs?
I did not.
Okay. What are the photographs of?
They appear to be...
Objection. I don't believe this officer can state what those photographs are. He just testified that when he got there, the children were already gone.
I don't know what the photographs are.
I'm trying to lay a foundation, Judge.
Okay, well, lay a foundation.
Detective Brock, do officers with the Leon County Sheriff's Office have body camera footage?
Yes, ma'am, they do.
Okay. Did you have a body cam on this day?
No, ma'am, I did not.
Okay. Did the responding officers?
Yes, they did.
Okay. The people, well, let me ask you, are there people in those two photographs?
Yes, there are.
Okay. Do you recognize where those photographs were captured?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And where were those photographs captured?
This is the incident location where the investigation began.
Okay. So that's the 6054 Dome Level Road?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Do you recognize the people that are in those photographs?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And who are the people that are in those photographs?
Brittany Delgado, Jonathan, Pedro Alvarado Ramirez, and Julio.
Okay. And would this have been taken on the day of the incident?
Yes, it would have.
Okay. And you saw both the children and both of the defendants in this case?
Yes.
Okay. Is that a fair and accurate representation of both of the defendants as well as both of the children?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Judge, at this time, state would ask to move states 9A and B into evidence.
Objection. He was not there when the photograph was taken. He testified that the children had already been gone when he arrived. I don't believe that it is a fair and accurate representation of what he saw that day.
He was the lead detective in this case. Evidence is turned over to him. I'm overruling your objection. 9A and B are in.
May I publish, Judge?
Sure.
Starting with states 9A. Can you see that all right, Deputy?
Yes, ma'am.
who is the person we see on the right side of the photograph?
That is Pedro, holding the child,
And what child is he holding?
Julio.
And then 9B. Who is the person in the foreground of the photo?
Brittany Delgado,
And who is she holding?
Jonathan.
Is Mr. Ramirez Alvarado also observable in this picture?
Yes, ma'am. He's in the background, to the right.
About approximately how long after the 911 call, if you remember, did you respond to the scene?
It was approximately 45 minutes from the time the 911 call came in to when I arrived on scene.
Did you immediately enter the home when you arrived on scene?
Not immediately, no, ma'am.
Did you eventually enter the home?
Yes.
Did you go to the back bedroom?
Yes.
When you entered the room, what was the temperature of the room like?
It was very hot. When you crossed the threshold into the bedroom, I felt a sort of a cloud, a wave, if you will, of heat emanating from the bedroom. It was considerably warmer than the rest of the house that I had been through.
Did other rooms of the house have air conditioning?
Yes.
Do you recall what rooms specifically?
The main room had a window AC unit, and I'm not sure if the master bedroom, if you will, where Brittany and Pedro were resting. I'm not sure if there was one in there, but there was definitely one in the main area of the home.
And I know this was December in Florida, but was it particularly cold on this day?
Not at all. In my opinion, as a lifelong resident in Tallahassee, it was a typical warm December day.
Did the Leon County Sheriff's Office impound the space heater that was found in that back bedroom?
Yes, ma'am.
Judge, may I approach the witness?
Yes.
This is States 8. Deputy, do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
And how is it that you recognize it?
This is the packaged up bag with the space heater in question that we took into evidence.
Okay. Is it in the same or substantially the same condition as the last time you saw it?
Yes, ma'am.
Does it have the unique LCSO case number on it?
Yes, it does.
Judge, at this time, State would ask to move States 8 into evidence.
Counsel?
No objection, sir.
So received.
Once this item was impounded, did you check it out at a later date for an experiment that was conducted?
Yes, I did.
Okay. So the same heater that was taken from the home was later used in the experiment with Dr. Bashong?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Were you present at the beginning of that experiment?
Yes, I was.
Are you the one that brought the space heater to the location?
Yes, I was.
would you have been the one that would have taken the space heater back into evidence when it was conducted, or would?
Since I wasn't there at the conclusion, it would have been someone else.
Okay. But it would have been taken back and logged back into LCSO
That's
evidence?
correct. The chain of custody would have been intact. Yes, ma'am.
Did Mr. Ramirez Alvarado get taken to the Leon County Sheriff's Office?
Yes, he did.
Was that directly from the scene?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you interview him?
Yes, I did.
Deputy Brock, do you speak Spanish?
No, ma'am.
Were you able to communicate with Mr. Ramirez Alvarado in English?
Very little.
Did he tell you that he speaks English, or he understands more English than he speaks?
That's correct.
Okay. So, did you ask him and make sure that he was able to understand you before you all started talking?
Yes, I did.
And he was fine speaking with you in English?
Yes, ma'am.
Before speaking with him, did you give him Miranda warnings?
I did.
Okay. Now, to make sure that he understood them, did you give them to him in Spanish?
Yes, I did.
Now, we already mentioned how you don't speak Spanish. Does the sheriff's office have a Miranda warnings form, like a written form in Spanish?
Yes.
Okay. So, did you have him read that to himself?
I did.
After he was done reading it, did he state that he understood?
He did.
And he agreed to talk to you about the facts of the day?
Yes, he did.
Did Mr. Ramirez Alvarado tell you who found the children?
Yes, he did.
Who found the children?
He said he did.
And where did he find the children?
In the far left bedroom, when you enter the homes to the left, is where he reported to find the children.
Did he describe for you how they were positioned in the room?
Yes.
Before finding the children, did he state what he was doing?
Yes, he did.
And what was he doing?
He said he was preoccupied, for lack of better words. He was on a phone call with someone.
Did he state for approximately how long he was on the phone?
He didn't give a specific time frame, but it seemed to be several minutes. But it's unclear.
And did he mention what the children were doing?
Yes.
And what did he say the children were doing?
Said they were playing.
Did he say where they were playing?
Yes, he said they were playing in the same bedroom.
Did Mr. Ramirez Alvarado ever mention going to check on the children?
Yes, he did.
Did he mention how many times he checked on the children?
At least 2 times that I know of.
When did you ask him about how long it was between when the children were playing and when he found them in the room?
He mentioned somewhere between 10 and 15 minutes. He claimed between the 2 times that he checked on them, it was just a matter of 15 minutes, 10 minutes or so.
How did he refer to Brittany Delgado?
As his wife.
May I have a moment, Judge?
Sure.
I know we kind of talked about how he mentioned where the children were in the room. Did you ask him where they were in the room in relation to the space heater?
I believe so. I believe I asked him to draw me a diagram and explain where everything was in relation to the heater, the kids, and where their approximate location was in the bedroom when he came in there to check on them.
Did you ask him if they were close to the heater or farther away from the heater?
I don't recall if I asked specifically the distance, but it's possible.
So you don't remember if he would have said that they were not close to the heater?
Yeah, I would have remembered that.
Okay. Do you remember him saying whether they were close to it or not?
It seemed the room wasn't very big to begin with, from what I can recall, they were in close proximity to the heater, not knowing the exact distance. But
no further questions at this time.
Cross.
May I retrieve the exhibit?
Sure.
Good afternoon, sir. How are you?
Doing fine, sir. How are you?
Great, thank you. We've met before, but my name's Edward Iturralde. I represent Pedro Ramirez Alvarado. Couple things based on your testimony. The last thing you said was that, from what I recall, sounds like you're not sure if that's what he said or not. Is that a fair statement?
What part are you referring to?
You said that he told you where the children were. And
Yes.
she asked, was it, in this place or that place? And you said, from what I recall.
She asked me specifically the distance and proximity, close or far away, if I think that's what you're referring to.
Okay. Do you remember precisely where he told you the children were?
Yes, they were in the bedroom where the space heater was.
All right. But exactly where in the bedroom when he got them?
In the center of the room.
All right. That's what you recall?
Yes, sir.
All right. And you said he made a diagram for you.
Yes.
Do you have that diagram?
I do not have that right now.
What happened to that diagram?
I believe it's on a notepad.
All right. And what happened to that notepad?
It's in my safekeeping.
Was it given in evidence?
No, it wasn't.
Why not?
I don't believe I recall producing it because it was an interview where he explained everything in relation to the space heater.
You don't think that was important?
Well, I mean, it was audio and video recorded in the interview, him explaining where everything was in relation to the diagram. So to me, that would suffice enough for evidence.
All right. You mentioned that he's told you that he went to check on them. Are you sure that was him that told you, or was it Brittany that told you he did that?
There was contradicting answers in both the interviews, but he alleged that they were both on a phone call, that he had ended a phone call prior to her, and she ordered him or told him to go check on the children. So he checked on them.
That's what she said.
That's what she said.
All right. And you interviewed both Pedro and Brittany.
Yes.
So is it possible that you might confuse their statements at all?
I don't think so. I don't recall him rebutting that statement that Brittany made. From what I recall, it was in line with what she was saying, that he recalled telling me that he was asked to go check on the children.
Okay. But did he say that he did that several times in 15-minute intervals?
According to my report, yes.
All right. Was it Pedro or Brittany that said they were married?
I believe both of them said they were married. They both explained to me their relationship.
Are they actually married?
I have not seen a marriage certificate, sir.
All right.
I take them at their word.
Do you recall speaking with Pedro that, in fact, they weren't married?
I do not recall, sir.
All right. And by saying you do not recall, that may have happened, that may not have happened, you're just not sure?
Correct.
All right. As part of your investigation, you subpoenaed some telephone records, and you obtained the telephones, the actual physical telephones of both Brittany and Pedro. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Do you have any of that information before you today?
Yes, I do.
All right. Could you take a look at the telephone records that you obtained and the Google records for Brittany Delgado for December 9th and 10th.
Okay.
You've got the Brittany one?
Yes, sir.
All right, perfect. Can you take a look and see what the last entry is on December 9th? And tell us some specifics about it. You don't have to give all the detail, but what time it was and how long it lasted.
All right, what I have in front of me is for the 10th. Let me see if I have the 9th in front of me.
It was something we also discussed at your deposition, which I have here, if that would refresh your
It
recollection.
would probably help, sir. I'm digging in the pack of papers here. I don't see the information for the 9th. I do have it for the 10th.
All right. It is on page 32, but I'll give you the whole
Okay.
report. Yeah.
Page 32, you said? This is 33.
May I approach, sir?
Sure.
Yes,
The
sir.
front page, this is page 32, but I wanted to make sure that you could see it was your deposition.
Okay. All right.
I'm sorry, that may be the first call she made the next day, not the last call, which is what I initially asked you. So I
Okay.
apologize.
Repeat that again, sir?
Yeah, I'm just thinking out loud. I had asked you the question initially, what was the last
one,
call
right.
on the 9th? And the deposition is actually telling you the first call on the 10th. So, my bad.
Okay.
So I don't know if that deposition would refresh your recollection or not, so you may need to consult your reports.
Yes.
You don't
I
remember?
don't have the 9th in front of me, sir. I apologize.
What was the first call
The first
Brittany
call.
made on the 10th? Or interaction with her phone?
Okay. According to our deposition,
Page 32, it should have a little flag on it.
okay, was that the second set you gave me? Okay. Okay, so would you like me just to read it, respond, or read it verbatim?
Whatever you
Okay.
prefer.
So her first activity in the morning looks like it was at 6:47 a.m. on Spotify, which is a music listening app.
All right, thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Can I have that back?
Yes, sir. Yeah,
Thanks.
sure can.
May I, sir?
One separate there. Isn't it? There you go. Mhm.
And similar question for Pedro Do you know when his last activity was on the 9th and his first activity was on the 10th?
I do not have the information from you. I do not recall, sir.
You don't have Pedro's records with you?
Let me double check.
Sir, you can take as long as you'd like.
Yeah, it appears I do not have it. I don't want to waste the court's time, but I thought I
Okay.
had that information
But
with me. Apparently I do not. So.
I have an excerpt of those records. Would that be something that could refresh your recollection?
You sure could, yes, sir.
All right. Does that look like the phone records you received for Pedro Ramirez Alvarado?
It looks similar, yes, sir.
All right. And so can you tell us what the last activity he had on December 9th was and the first activity he had on the morning of the 10th?
Outbound call, December 9th for 27 minutes. And,
What time was that?
okay. 22:54 hours, military time. And then, what was the question about the 10th? I'm sorry, the second question.
Yeah, the first activity or call
On the 10th?
on the 10th.
Okay. Looks like he attempted to make a phone call that morning. It has 0 time for duration. And then he made a second call an hour later, which was longer.
All right. What were the
101 minutes, I believe, or seconds, 101 seconds.
101 seconds? What are the times of those two calls, please?
10:57 and 11:57.
All right. Do you recall that corroborating what both of them told you? She's told you that she woke up about 7 o'clock that morning. He told you he woke up about 11 o'clock that morning?
Yes, sir, that corroborates, yes, sir.
All right. And the photographs that were shown to you before that, I don't know, had you seen that photograph before today?
The still shot?
Yeah, the still shot of Pedro and Brittany and the two kids?
I had not seen the printed photograph in that form, no, sir.
But had you seen the body cam video
Yes,
of
it was
those?
reviewed, yes, sir.
All right. And did you notice in those photographs that the children had T-shirts on as well as diapers?
Yes.
All right. You prepared numerous reports in this case, is that correct?
That's correct.
And among those were arrest reports for each of the suspects?
Yes, sir.
On Brittany's report, did you list her as the primary caregiver?
Yes, sir.
And that's your belief that she was a primary caregiver?
Yes, she's the mother of the children.
All right. Was he the father of the children?
Yes, according to the statements I received in my investigation, yes, sir.
Statements from whom?
Brittany,
Did he admit that he was the father?
I mean, if we're going to play semantics on words, but as far as I could tell, he was the caretaker, primary caretaker for the family, the breadwinner. So to me, and he's been with them for an extended part of time. According to Brittany's statement, the children call him Poppy, so that's a father, in my opinion.
All right.
I think that's Spanish for father, am I right? I don't speak Spanish.
I'll leave that to the interpreters, but yes.
That's been stipulated here in the trial, but
So both of them are the primary caregivers, according to what you just said.
yes, sir.
All right. Doesn't primary mean that one is above the other?
Objection, Judge, asking for a legal conclusion invades the province of the
Sustained,
jury.
move on.
When you got there, was the heater turned on?
No, sir.
Do you recall if the heater was plugged in?
It was unplugged.
Unplugged.
In fact, in Brittany's statement, she admitted to unplugging it when she went into to tend to the children, to respond to them.
All right. And do you know who turned the heater on?
Julio, she alleged in the interview that Julio was turning the heater on, playing with it throughout the day.
So you believe, based on your investigation, it was the child that did it?
Yes.
All right. And who was it that put the children in that heated room?
Well, let me back up. You said a child that did it, so I want to be clear. The child apparently was controlling the heater. Whether or not Brittany plugged it in or the child plugged it in, I do not know.
Thank you for the clarification. Do you know who put the children in that room?
I believe, according to their statements, that the children were asleep when they arrived at home, and I believe they each took a child and put them in the bedroom, for my recollection.
Wasn't Brittany's statement that they slept in the couches?
She did say that, yes.
All right. So you don't know who put them in the bedrooms?
I can go by what they tell me, sir.
All right. And so if she said she put them on the couches, you don't have a statement that says she put them in the bedroom, right?
Right.
All right. Do you know how long the kids were in that room?
When they first arrived from out of town, you mean? Or you mean in the morning during the day?
How long were the kids in that heated room, if you know?
I'm gonna object to speculation.
Don't guess. If you know, tell them. If you don't, say, I don't know.
If you're looking for hard this time from this time, is that what you're asking from me, or an estimate?
The question is, if you know, how long were the children in the heated room?
From my investigation, from the statements that collected in the evidence, that the children were put there when they arrived from out of town early that morning, and they were there and remained there until EMS arrived, or when they took them out of the house to respond to EMS.
We just finished talking about, she said she put them on the couch.
Counsel, don't argue. Ask a question.
Yes, sir. Do you recall just telling me that she told you they put them on the couch?
Correct, sir. But telling me one thing and the evidence showing me something different is a completely different thing.
Well, what evidence do you have that they were placed in the bedroom?
Well, I'm not a medical doctor, but them being overcome with heat-related illness tells me that they were in a room with somewhere where a heat source for an extended period of time that caused their illness in a medical event.
Absolutely fair. I'm asking you who put them there and how long they were in there, and I'm getting different answers, so I'm just trying to make sure I understand what your testimony is.
I'm gonna object to speculation. He was not there.
He wasn't there.
So you don't know?
I wasn't there.
Thank you. In doing the Miranda for Mr. Ramirez Alvarado, you mentioned that you used a Spanish form.
Yes, sir.
Is that a written, printed form?
It is a digital form.
A digital form that you had on your telephone?
Yes, sir. The PDF, yes, sir.
So it's not a paper that he signed, it's just something that you showed him on your phone?
Yes, so for example, we have a paper copy Miranda form. Is an exact replica of that we could pull up on a cell phone and use it at our discretion.
All right. And in your investigations, do you normally do the telephone version of the Miranda, or do you have folks sign the written form?
I do both, and it depends on where I'm at. If I'm in the field or if I'm in the office, it could vary. Depends on the circumstance.
And this interview was at the office?
Yes.
And you didn't use the form?
I used the form, yes I did.
Not the written form?
Not the written form, but I used the Miranda form.
All right. I think you mentioned that you've received training in police operations and police procedures at the very beginning of your...
General question, I'm not sure where you're getting at.
Okay. Have you received training in police procedures and...
I would say so. There's not like a specific class, but there's training upon training upon training and experience and field work, and if that's what you mean.
Right, I'm just talking about in general. There's all kinds of different classes that are on specific topics, but they're all generally police topics.
Yes.
Have you taken any sort of training regarding obtaining statements from suspects?
Yes.
And in that training, did they ever tell you that people lie sometimes.
Of course.
In that training, did they tell you that sometimes people minimize what happened?
Of course, yes.
How do you know, if it was in the training or if you can tell us from your experience, when something is true or not, based on their statement?
So body language tells us a lot. When we pose a question, how they respond before they maybe give us a verbal response, the body never lies. There's a physiological response according to stress. If stress is put on by asking the question, sir, did you kill John Smith? And then see how his body responds to a very direct and serious question. The body can give us indications. How we hear them speak and their speech, the tone, consistency, whether their mouth is dry, the heart, or increased respiration of breathing, showing patterns of nervousness. Those things they're not a guarantee that they're lying, but they can point to this person may be deceptive.
Okay. Is it also fair to say from your training that usually the first statement is not the true statement? You have to dig a little bit to get to the true statement.
It depends. If we're talking with suspects and they're the focus of let's say a homicide, that sometimes can be true. Yes, sir.
All right. No further questions. Thank you.
Redirect.
Deputy, do you recall specifically whether or not Mr. Ramirez Alvarado told you that he checked on the children multiple times?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And he told you that the children were playing
Yes,
shortly before 911 was called?
correct.
Okay. Fair to say that each of them, Ms. Delgado and Mr. Ramirez Alvarado, gave numerous versions of the events?
That's correct.
I don't have any other questions for him. Actually, I had one and I lost my train of thought, so I will let you go. Thank you.
Okay.
You may step down.
Sir.
Counsel, come up here a moment.
And he's free to go for today. I have his contact information.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay. I'm sure you have a motion to make, so why don't we just break today and we'll hear your motion and start back when 8:30 in the morning.
That works for me.
Hmm?
That works for me.
Okay.
Thank you, Judge. Judge, at this time, the state will rest.
Members of the jury, we've reached the stage of the trial that I need to get with the attorneys out of your presence. Also, it's probably a pretty good time to break for the day. Maybe you can avoid some of that traffic. Let's try to be here at 8:30 in the morning. We'll do our best to start at 8:30. Having said that, I understand, and I readily admit that we give new meaning to the term "we'll start on time." During the break, please do not discuss the case among yourselves or with anyone else. Should this become media worthy, please do not read, listen, or watch any reports about this case. The only way we can ensure a fair and impartial trial is if your verdict is based solely and exclusively on the evidence received by you in this courtroom in the presence of the attorneys, Mr. Alvarez, and myself. Plus, the media is wrong about 90% of the time anyway. Y'all have a good evening, and we'll see you in the morning. Oh, good. Mr. Aldi, you have a motion?
Oh, yes, sir, thank you. Your Honor, we move for a judgment of acquittal. As to both counts, I don't think there's an issue that there were children that were tragically injured that day, but I do think that their evidence is lacking as to what my client possibly did to contribute to that. We heard that they got home from a trip from Panama City late on the 9th, and they all went to sleep. From Detective Brock's testimony, Miss Delgado's statement, Miss Delgado was up about 7 a.m., 6:47 according to her telephone. According to my client's telephone and his statement, he woke up at about 11 o'clock. So that's a 5-hour difference. The testimony from Dr. Bashong was that it could have taken from 45 minutes to 2 hours and 45 minutes. My client could have been asleep during that entire time. Every single witness who I've asked the question of, who put the kids in there, they could not answer. Who turned the heater on, they could not answer. No one said that it was Pedro Ramirez Alvarado, and all the evidence shows that he was asleep for much of that morning. When he woke up, he did go to check the kids. He found them unresponsive. He started trying to perform his own help as he could, and he asked Brittany Delgado to call 911, and we see in the photo that they ran outside. They have not proven their case, not even with the benefit of the doubt of the first JOA. Thank you.
Counsel. Response?
Yes, sir. So, taking the evidence in the light most favorable to the state, which is the standard in this case, I believe the state has presented a prima facie case to get this case to the jury by the defendant's own statement given to law enforcement. The children were alive when he was awake. He checked on them and they were alive and playing. I think ultimately the issue of whether or not that this defendant is at fault, whether his neglect rose to the level of culpable negligence to make him guilty of neglecting these children to the fact of the aggravated manslaughter and the aggravated child neglect, is ultimately going to be a jury question. I believe that this one. I believe that Durand, D-U-R-A-N-D, v. State from the 5th District Court of Appeal is relevant in that case. The person who was found guilty of neglect of a child, where a child was repeatedly forced to sleep on a porch and sleep in a box, that person was simply essentially a roommate or the owner of the home. He was not a caregiver of the child in any way, but he had domain over the house. The DCA ruled that based just upon the word caregiver, and in the jury instructions, as it relates to child abuse and child neglect, means a parent, adult household member, or other person responsible for a child's welfare. I think the state has met each element to get this case to the jury. I think a jury could easily find Mr. Ramirez Alvarado guilty based on the evidence that we have presented.
Anything else?
Yes, Your Honor, and I apologize. I was under the impression that we would be at this point tomorrow, so I didn't bring the case law that I had pulled up. But there is case law from the first DCA, I don't have the sites in front of me, that a single act is insufficient. There's no evidence that there was a pattern of my client or Ms. Delgado leaving the children in the room with this heater. In cases of, which is kind of similar, leaving children in a car and having them overheat in the car, there was a motion to dismiss here recently where Judge Shostrom dismissed the case because although the child did die and the mother did leave him in the car, she was under the mistaken impression that the child was not in the car. She thought the child was somewhere else. And so without showing that there was a pattern of neglect, without showing that she did it intentionally, they could not go forward even to this point. It was dismissed by the judge before it ever got to a jury. And there's other cases, like I said, in the first DCA, but I apologize, I don't have them. I'll bring them to you tomorrow morning.
Okay. Well, I find it is a jury question. You can renew your motion at the end of the trial, of course, and bring your case law with you then. But I find it's a jury question, and I'll see you all at 8:30 in the morning.
Yes, sir?
Thank you, Your
You
Honor.
may want to look over those jury instructions tonight, because I have a feeling there's a bunch of changes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Y'all have a good evening.
Thank
You as
Your
well.
Honor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. The next video in this series is coming soon. Be sure to check the description of this video for links to other videos in this case, including links to Brittany and Pedro interrogation videos. We apologize if we made any errors with respect to the witnesses' names. We are working off hard-to-read handwritten notes from the court. Until next time, Stephanie the Sleuth and Mentor Lawyer. Thanks for watching Deep Dive True Crime. Presiding over the trial is Circuit Court Judge William Gary, serving as a senior judge. The prosecutor team consists of Savannah Jacobs as lead counsel and Ryan Fields as second chair. The defense attorney for Pedro is Mr. Edward Eteralde. The jury is composed of 5 women and 1 man, plus 1 female alternate.